Hello everyone, welcome to Vishesh Educational Videos. In this video, I'm explaining about relationship types, relationship sets, and also along with that roles and structural constraints. Right? So if you are not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel and please don't forget to like the video and please don't forget to share the video with your friends. So to get the notification of my new videos, please click the bell icon. So let me begin the explanation of relationship types, relationship sets, roles and structural constraints. So what is a relationship types? And first of all, what is a relationship? You should understand what is a relationship. When an attribute of one entity type refers to another entity type, some relationship exists. Right? For example, you can see when an employee works for the department, the relationship will be exist between employee and the department. Employee works for the department. For example, see, employee works for the department. So employee is related to department. How is employee is related to department? Employee works for the department. That is the relationship. So when is a relationship will be there? When whenever attribute of one entity type refers to another entity type, some relationship exists. And also I can give one more example. For example, the attribute manager of the department refers to an employee who manages the department, right? That is a relationship. Manager, right? Attribute manager. If a manager, right, refers to an employee, so manager is related to the department, right? And manager is also an employee. Just remember that. Manager is also an employee and manager manages the department. Here you can see there employee and department are related because manager is also an employee. In the same way, right? Project. Employee can work for the project. Here employee and project are dependent. See, employee can work for the project. So a project and employee can be related to each other. Relationship exists. Hope you are understanding, guys. So this type of relationship should be represented in a ER diagram, right? I can't include this relationship as attributes. Remember that. Hope you are understanding. Next, I don't want to make you get confused, right? So this is the simple example. So the employee can work for the department. This is the relationship. Next, so here consider a relationship type works for between the two entity types, employee and department, right? Each employee with a department, right? Each employee works for the department, and you can see here E1, E2, E3, E4, E5, E6, E7 are instances of the employees. That by 7 employees. D1, D2, D3 are nothing but instances of the department. How many departments? 3 departments. You can see there employee 1 can work for the department 1 also, right? And the same way employee 2 can work for the department 2. In the same way employee 3 can work for the department 1. Employee 4 can work for the department 2, right? And one more important thing, the employees can work for more than one department also. You can see that employee 3 works for department 1, employee 1 also works for department 1. Hope you are understanding, guys, right? So that is possible. You can see there employee E1, E3, E6 work for department 1, employee E2, E4 work for department 2, employee E5, E7 work for department 3. Employees can work for multiple departments. In ER diagrams, relationship types are depicted as diamond shaped boxes, that is rhombuses. You know that, right? So the relationship can be represented in ER diagrams as rhombuses, right? So here you can see the relationship between the employee and the department works for is represented as rhombus. Hope you are understanding, guys. Next, so now you understood the relationship, right? Next, what is the relationship degree? So guys, so far you understood what is a relationship type. Here, what is the type of a relationship? Works for. Employee works for the department. So type relationship type is works for. So next, relationship degree. What is a relationship degree? Degree of a relationship type is nothing but the number of participating entity types. Based on that, I can identify the degree of a relationship. For example, here, how many entities are participating here? 3 entities participating here. Supplier is one entity, part is one entity, project is one entity. So, relationship degree is nothing but number of participating entities. Degree of relationship can be identified by the number of participating entities. For example, if 2 entities are participating, then it can be called as binary. The degree is called as binary. For example, in a works for relationship, the degree is 2. You can see in a works for relationship, how many entities are participating here? 2 entities, that is employee entity and department entity. That's why this relationship can be called as binary relationship. How many entities are participating here? 2 entities. In the same way, you can see ternary relationship. If number of entities is more than 2, then it can be called as ternary, right? So for example, see, supplier, a part, project, 3 entities are participating in a relationship. That's why this relationship degree can be ternary, 3 more than 2. Hope you are understanding, guys, right? So this is the degree of relationship. So the number of participating entities in a relationship defines the degree of a relationship type. Next, role names and recursive relationship. For example, each entity type that participates in a relationship type plays a particular role in the relationship. For example, the role name signifies the role of a particular participating entity. For example, in the works for relationship, employee plays the role of a employee, right? For example, see here, here the employee is nothing but a number of employees. Department is nothing but a employer. Hope you understand. Department is my boss. Department is a employer. Department is playing the role of the employer. Employee entity is playing the role of employees. So each entity is playing their roles. Hope you are understanding. Role is very important. Department is playing the role of a employer because department is given the job to employee. Hope you are understanding. Department is a employer. Employee entity is nothing but a employees. Employees are offered a job by the department. Hope you are understanding. Department is playing the role of a employer. Employee entity is playing the role of the employees. Right? This role names, particularly this role names, plays a very important role while writing the year diagrams. You can see there. In a works for relationship, employee plays a role of a employee or a worker. Department plays a role of a employer. Understood, guys? So suppose if you have any doubts, please post your doubts in the comment section. And one more important thing, same entity type can participate more than once in a relationship type. Then I can call that relationship as a recursive relationship. You can ask me a question. Same entity, how it can participate more than once in a relationship means, for example, here, manager, right, can manages the department. Manager manages the department. That is one relationship. Manager works for the department. That means manager can be an employee also. Right? Manager is one entity, and manager can be an employee also. Manager is also an employee. You can see there. That is a recursive relationship. Manager manages the department. Manager works as the employee. Manager is also an employee. Manager is also a head. So manager plays the dual role here. Manager is a head of the department. Manager is the employee of the department. That is recursive relationship. Same entity is participating 2 times. Employee. Here manager is a employee also. Manager is the head also. Hope you are understanding. That is recursive relationship. Getting, guys? Next, constraints on binary relationship types. What are the constraints? Constraints are nothing but I can tell how many instances can participate in the entities. For example, I can tell all the employees can work for the department, or I can tell only 2 employees should work for the department. Like that, I can tell about the constraints or conditions, that how many instances can participate in the relationship. For example, to define these constraints, I can use 2 types of constraints here. Cardinality ratio is one type, participation constraint is another type. So see here, in cardinality ratios there are 4 types: 1:1, 1:n, n:1, and m:1. So 1:1, here I already told you, I can specify how many instances can participate in the entity. 1:1 means only one instance can participate in both the entities. I can restrict the number of instances that can participate in the relationship. For example, this is the example. Here 7 employees are there, 3 departments are there. I can restrict that only one entity can participate in both the entities. For example, only one employee can manage one department. Only one department can have one head. One department can have one manager. Hope you are understanding. Right? Only one employee can manage at most one department. Each department should have only one manager. Understanding, guys? Hope you are understanding. Here I am restricting that only one employee can manage one department. That is condition, constraint. I am restricting the number of instances that are participating in the relationship. Here 7 employees are there, 3 departments are there, but only one employee is participating for managing one department. Hope you are understanding. So that is right, constraint. So what are the different types of constraints or cardinality ratios I can specify? 1:1, 1:n, n:1, m:1. So 1:1 example is what? One employee can manage at most one department. Right? For department only one HOD will be there. For one department only one manager will be there. One manager manages one department. That is 1:1 relationship. This is one condition. In the same way, we have 3 different cardinality ratios. 1:1 cardinality ratio is over. Now m:1 cardinality ratio. In m:1, m number of employees can work for n number of projects. M number of employees can work for n number of projects. Hope you are understanding. Any number of employees can work for any number of projects. That is m:1 relationship. Here I'm not restricting anything. Anybody can work for any project. In this way, I can specify how many number of instances can participate in a relationship. Hope you are understanding. Instances means you know that, right? Employee entity have 7 instances, project entity, like that. Any number of employees can be there in a office. Any number of projects can be there in a office. That is instances. Hope you are understanding, guys. Right? Next, in the same way, 1:1 is over, m:1 is over, right? Wait, sorry. Next, 1:n. What example I can give? For a 1:n, one employee can work for n number of projects. That is also possibility. I can assign one employee for any number of projects. That is possibility. Next, n:1, right? N number of employees can work for one department. That is also possible. N number of employees can work for one department. So these are the examples for different cardinality ratios. Next, participation constraints and existence dependencies. So in a participation constraints, there are 2 types. One is total participation, and one is partial participation. Total participation is displayed by two lines, double lines. Partial participation is represented by single lines. See here in this diagram, total participation, for example, dependent, between the dependent and the employee, there is a total participation. That means dependent, that is a relative of the employee, is totally dependent on the employee. Hope you are understanding, guys. So the employee, company will collect the relatives information. For example, for something happens to the employee, they have to inform the relatives, right? That's why for each employee they will collect the relative information also. This relative information, right? This relative, this dependent can be totally dependent on the employee, because if you remove employee from the company, the relative information will also be removed. That's why this relative is totally dependent on the employee. Total participation. For example, all the employees should work for the same department. That is total participation. Total, all the employees, total employees working for this department. That is total participation. You can see there in this diagram, the dependent and the employee relationship is total, because relative is totally dependent on employee. If you remove the employee, dependent will also be removed. That's why. Hope you are understanding. That is total participation. Partial participation means, for example, employee, between the employee and the supervision. Not all the employees can be a supervisor. Only one employee can be a supervisor. That is partial participation. All the employees should work for the department. That is total participation. But all the employees can't be a head or a supervisor for the department. That is partial participation. Hope you are understanding. So to define the partial participation, between the relationship type should use a single line. For a total participation, you can see there you should use double lines. Dependent and employee. Dependent is fully depend on the employee. If you remove the employee, dependent will also be removed. That's why total participation should be represented in double line. Hope you are understanding, guys. Suppose if you have any doubts, please post your doubts in the comment section, right? Hope you understood the participation constraints, that is total participation and partial participation. For example, I told you, right, every employee works for the department, that is total participation. Every employee can't be the supervisor, that is partial participation. Hope you understood, right? Notation: for total participation, double line; for partial participation, single line. Next, in the same way, for entities we have attributes, right? For the same way, for relationship type also we have attributes. For relationship type also we can include the attributes. For example, see here. So managers, for example, between the employee and the department there is a relationship managers. In that managers, for a relationship type managers, I included the attribute start date. You can see there, in the same way as the entity, I included the attribute for the relationship also, that is start date. Start date tells about the joining date of the manager, right? Start date tells about the joining date of the manager, when he started managing the department. Hope you understood, guys. In the same way as the entity, I can include the attributes for the relationship type also. Here for a manager's relationship between the employee and the department, I included attribute start date. Getting, guys? Next, weak entity types. It is very simple. Weak entity types means entity types that don't have key attributes of their own. Regular entity types that are strong entity, they have key attributes of their own. Now, for example, see this here diagram. Here I told you the department, the dependent, the relative of an employee. It is a for example, it is a weak entity. Dependent is a weak entity. Now we can ask a question, why? I already told you, dependent entity will exist if employee entity is there. Dependent entity will be removed if employee entity is not there. That's why dependent is a weak entity. It doesn't have its own attribute. Dependent, relative is purely dependent on the employee. If employee is quit the job, his information, relative information will also be erased. That's why this weak entity doesn't have its own identity. It's purely dependent on the employee identity. If employee is there, relative will be there. If employee is not there in the company, his relative information will also be removed. That's why dependent or a relative is a weak entity here. That's why the weak entity is represented by a double rectangle in the here diagram. You can see there here, right? So it doesn't have its own key attribute because it's purely related to employee. Weak entity types always have the partial key, right? Partial key. We call, right? This partial key can be extracted by, right, which is the attribute that can be uniquely identify weak entities. It can be extracted by the owner entity, that is strong entity. You can see the dependent has the name, dependent have the name. The name of the dependent is the partial key. It is the partial key, right? Hope you are understanding. Next, assume that no two dependents of the same employee have the same first name. That's why I use the name as the partial key, right? So same, its chances are very less having the two relations of a two different same employee. For example, no two dependents of the same employee. Suppose I have two relative information. So two relatives can't have the same names, right? That's why. So I can make the name as the partial key. Hope you are understanding, guys. Partial key, which is the attribute that can be uniquely identify weak entities, and it's purely dependent on the employee entity. If you remove the employee, these details will also be removed. That's why it's a weak entity. And one more important thing, between the strong entity and the weak entity, there will be always identifying relationship will be there, and also total relationship will be there between the weak entity and the strong entity. For example, you can see there the identifying dependents of the relationship name between the dependent on the employee is what it is, dependents of. You can see the dependents of is the identifying relationship. You can identify the dependent through the employee. If employee is there only, you can identify your relative. If employee is not there, how can you identify the relative or a dependent? That's why there will be identifying relationship between the strong and the weak entity. Dependent is the weak entity, employee is the strong entity. You can identify the dependent if a employee is there. That's why identifying relationship exists between a weak entity and a strong entity. And one more important thing, there will be total participation between the weak entity and strong entity. Total participation means the dependent is totally dependent. The relative is totally depend on the employee. The relative is totally depend on the employee. That's why total participation. Why the relative is totally depend on the employee? If he is there in the company, his information is also be there. If the employee is not in the company, his information will also be deleted. That's why this relative information is totally dependent on employee. That's why total participation. Hope you are understanding, guys. Between the weak entity and the strong entity, identifying relationship exists, and also total participation exists between the weak entity and the strong entity. Hope you are understanding the concept. Suppose if you have any doubts, please post your doubts in the comment section, right? Thank you for watching the video.